Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, the battle of the trillionaire tech titans. Apple fans get their hands on the latest iPhones a day after Amazon rolled out its attempt to get Echo everywhere. Who will dominate devices of the future? Plus, Facebook pulls back on presidential campaign support after the uproar over the help it gave candidate Trump in 2016. We'll look at what difference that will make. And Gap and its family of brands aim to reach customers of all shapes and sizes. CEO Art Peck tells us about why he's building a diverse workforce and ad strategy to attract a global buyer. More from our exclusive interview coming up. But first, to our top story. It might be one of, if not the biggest day of the year for Apple diehards. It is the first time they can get their hands on Apple's new iPhones. And greeting customers in Palo Alto this morning was none other than CEO Tim Cook. This year, though, the line was perhaps a bit shorter, maybe due to more customers opting for online delivery. Also, remember, there's not a big design overhaul this year, just bigger, better, and cheaper versions of the iPhone X. All of this going down just one day after Amazon had its own massive device launch yesterday, featuring voice-activated home appliances like a microwave to wall clocks, car plug-ins, and more. So, which of these trillion-dollar tech titans will dominate our connected lives in the near future? To answer that, I've got Andy Cunningham, author of Get to Aha, a look at marketing in the digital age. Before that, she was one of the people who helped Steve Jobs launch the Macintosh in the early days of Apple. Also with me, Guru Hariharan, CEO of Boomerang, and in LA, our very own Mark Gurman, who covers Apple for Bloomberg. So Mark, what do you make of the lines today? Is this going to reflect in initial sales? Are more people just ordering online?
So to break it down, what we're seeing is lines about half that what we saw last year for the iPhone X, but about double that what we saw for the iPhone 8. So if you think about the success of the lines and the orders so far, I would sandwich it right in between. The iPhone 8 last year didn't have very strong demand, but the iPhone X did. So overall, for a phone that, for all intents and purposes, is far more expensive than many of the other mainstream phones in the market, and this year having very few new features, is a home run for Apple.
Look, Andy, you worked with Steve Jobs for many years when there was only one product in any one product category. Now there's a family of iPhones. It's hard to remember how many iPhones there are. What do you think about this strategy?
So I think the real product is iOS and all of the connections to it and all of the peripherals and accessories and all of that. So I think it's really still kind of one product.
So then is it a smart strategy?
I think it is. I mean, if that's the product, the more accessories and stuff they can sell with it, the better, I think.
Meantime, Mark, I do want to get your thoughts on everything that Amazon unveiled. Again, a lot of products. Hard to remember. I mean, I think there's 70-some products and devices they now have out there. Walk us through what you think has real potential. What might be more of an experiment for Amazon?
So what we're seeing, if you're comparing Apple to Amazon, two completely different strategies. Apple sticking to a few things. People complain they have too many phones, but in reality it's 7. Whereas Amazon, they released, upwards of 7 new products yesterday. Things that are experiments, right? This microwave, which by the way, they're not actually making themselves. It's just an Amazon Basics branded microwave. That's an experiment. I think that's going to feed into their Whole Foods longer-term strategy. This wall clock, I don't know how many of those they're going to sell. The subwoofer and the amplifier products are going to be very niche. That's for a very small market. What's going to be successful for sure is the new Echo Show with that bigger screen, and the new Echo Dot with the louder speakers, and the new Echo Plus. The Echoes themselves, the smart speakers, those are the mainstream devices, in addition to perhaps the DVR for their TV product. But the other stuff is just around the edges. It's not going to make a big impact on their future. It's essentially them just throwing things at the wall to see what's going to stick. And their hope is maybe 1 or 2 of those will stick and they can turn those into long-term product categories. But I don't foresee the wall clock being a long-term solution for them.
We did talk to Amazon's Dave Limp, the guy you saw on stage there unveiling these devices. I asked him, Guru, which devices he thought were going to be most important, and he talked about the bread and butter speakers. So those aside, what do you think will stick of these products?
I think some of the devices that are coming into the kitchen are extremely strategic for Amazon. And the reason being, this is really the next trillion-dollar play for Amazon, and here's why. Once you get in the kitchen, you're now starting to look at the grocery market. Now imagine after going after the microwave, if they have the refrigerator. Once they get the refrigerator, imagine having Alexa automatically order your cheese or your milk or whatever you're running out of, the yogurt and all that. And Amazon already has the Amazon lock installed in your home, where somebody can come in and automatically get your products into your home and into the refrigerator. And that, just to take a step back and think about that market, that's an $800 billion market in the US. And so going after that market is extremely strategic, and they have to make a big couple of plays to go and win. And this, by the way, is on the heels of Amazon, the news coming out that they're going to be launching 3,000 Amazon Go stores across the nation in the next 3 years. So all of this is really a part of a very grand strategy to winning the grocery market.
Andy, how do you think Amazon's strategy compares to Apple's?
Well, I think Amazon is a data collection company. It's a big data company. It's not at all what Apple is, which I call Apple an essential luxury brand. It's a luxury because they're a social currency to having an Apple product in your hands. And it's essential because once your life is tied up to iOS, you're addicted, you're dependent on it. So Apple is good for now, while this particular marketplace is addicted to iOS. But when the next big thing gets introduced into the market that replaces or disrupts iOS, Apple's going to be in a bad position. And I don't think Apple's going to be the one to disrupt itself. They haven't really seen a next big thing happen since Steve died. And whereas Amazon doesn't really need the next big thing, Amazon is perfectly happy to do many incremental small things to collect more and more and more data to enable them to not only get in the grocery market, but every market there is. Healthcare is a huge opportunity for them. Retail is a huge opportunity for them. Home electronics is everything. Everything is a huge market.
Now that said, Google Home has a home speaker. Google Home is a smart speaker that's really giving Amazon Echo a run for its money. Apple has the HomePod, which hasn't made a huge dent yet. And I sat down with Tim Cook last year when the HomePod was unveiled, and I said, well, look at all this competition that's out there already. Take a listen to what he told me then.
For us, it's not about being first, it's about being the best and giving the user an experience that delights them every time. And so we don't let that impatience result in shipping something that's just not great.
Look, Apple wasn't first to smartphones
or anything
either.
else.
So do you think Apple, and they want to be part of the connected home as well, do you think Apple can come in from behind here, or is Amazon so far ahead it's too late?
So if you're going head to head on one thing, you can see how the best product may win. But if you think about Amazon's strategy, they have really perfected the network effect of it. And what I mean by that is, once you launch a set of things around Alexa, you have AWS developers behind it, you have Amazon advertising dollars behind it, and it's really the full network that's going behind making anything and everything successful at Amazon. So it's not like they're not taking one thing, a phone or an Alexa speaker, and going to the market saying, I'm going to be the best at that. They're really trying to use that as one of the means to drive the broader network effect in AWS, in retail, and in advertising platform services.
Now, Steve Jobs always had words about the competition. I still remember being on the earnings call when he said, we think these Android tablets are dead on arrival. What would Steve Jobs be saying right now about all these Amazon devices?
I think he would be saying, I don't think he'd say dead on arrival, but I think he would say, these are not the kinds of appliances that we're building at Apple. We're building this luxury, elegant, great utility, amazing design, and by the way, pride of association. There's huge pride of association as a customer when you've got an Apple product on your table. That same pride of association or that brand identity doesn't exist with the Amazon products.
But could it?
It could, but they're not moving in that direction. They're not moving at all in the direction of creating a luxury brand. They're really all about data collection. And so the more devices they can have out there that collect data, that inform different parts of Amazon, to get into different markets like grocery, et cetera. That's really what they're looking for.
If you look at the ASP, or the product price point of each of these products, most of these products that Amazon has launched is below $200. So you can easily see that they're not going after device profits in these things, because that's not going to give you a lot of gross margin by selling something for $200. But if you look at how many times you're going to create a new stickiness in Prime membership, how many new Prime members are you going to get? What is the value of the data that's coming in when you can know that the mom is going and waiting in that particular in a particular area for their son to play soccer, and maybe you need to put a Amazon Go store around it. So that's really like the incremental value is coming from stickiness to Prime membership and data, and a lot of that movement that they can get in various parts of their business.
All right, Guru Hariharan, Boomerang CEO, also former Amazon exec, Andy Cunningham Collective, and Mark Gurman, of course, who is going to get his hands on all of these products and let us know what he thinks when he does. Thank you. Coming up, Facebook says it is pulling back on the level of support for presidential campaigns. We're going to take a look at what that means next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Facebook says it won't provide the level of support to future presidential campaigns that it offered the 2016 candidates. Only President Trump's campaign took the social network up on its offer of embedding Facebook staff in the campaign, a factor which the Republicans' 2016 digital director Brad Parscale said was crucial to Trump's win. But Hillary Clinton's campaign also had big-name tech support, with Google's then executive chairman Eric Schmidt helping set up political data analysis. To talk about all of this, Facebook's announcement, we are joined by Bloomberg Tech reporter Sarah Fryer and former Google exec and Republican digital strategist Anton Vulai. Sarah, I'll start with you. What is Facebook going to stop doing, and what are they going to continue to do when it comes to presidential campaigns?
So the way Facebook has built out its politics work is kind of similar to how it's built out its work for any other business. The more money you spend, the more support you get, the more hands-on people come into your office. And in the case of the Trump campaign, they had people coming in several times a week. Parscale even used the term embeds. You know, these people who are really embedded with the campaign and help them on their strategy, which was drastically different than the Clinton campaign strategy. Now they're pulling back on that sort of thing, and they want to do is they want to improve their website so that there's a more broad support for anyone who needs it.
Now, I sat down with Brad Parscale a couple of months ago, who is now the 2020 campaign manager. So he has the job Steve Bannon had in 2016. Take a listen to what he told me about how crucial Facebook was in their win.
I've been very specific that I think Facebook's how we won. In a lot of ways. I think President Trump won. I think Facebook is that 0.1% that delivered his message. I think if Facebook wouldn't exist, it would have been a lot tougher.
Anton, do you think without this same level of help this time around, that'll be a huge disadvantage to the Trump campaign and others?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. One, I want to note what Sarah said, that what they did in 2016 was they did offer it to both campaigns, and the Trump team obviously took them up on that offer for more work. In terms of going forward, I think what's lost in sometimes the conversation around Facebook and campaigns is Facebook is a piece of that. I think what Brad has mentioned and other folks that have worked on the Trump team is the amount of testing and the volume of creative they've pushed out over time. And so that's a huge factor. And so yes, Facebook's a platform to deliver that, to deliver donations, to get people to sign up. But the testing and the creative operation they put together is really one of the major things I think that differentiated them from the Clinton campaign.
Look, you worked on elections inside Google. Google, is now being criticized for being left-leaning. You've got the president attacking Google. You've got this video leaking of co-founder Sergey Brin talking about how he felt the election was offensive. I mean, how should these tech companies, regardless of personal political views, be engaging with political candidates?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I did spend time here in Washington, D.C. with Google. I worked around some amazing folks that regardless of political affiliation, we're really trying to push forward a message of more people getting involved in the democratic process. And so whether it's Google, Facebook, Twitter, all these platforms, they're private companies. They have one of their goals amongst many is during the election period is trying to get more people involved in the democratic process. And listen, can communication methods be abused, and especially new communication methods? Yes, but that's been around for as long as people have communicated.
Well, and Sarah, it's also about trying to make sure that these platforms are metal-proof, right? Which Mark Zuckerberg has said it's going to be very, very difficult, but they're certainly going to try. It's been rough. I mean, Facebook internally, after Cambridge Analytica hit in March, was even questioning whether they should have political ads at all. That was like one of the things. Is it more trouble than it's worth? And they decided that, we still need to have that, but we need to do it differently. We need to make it more transparent. We need to make it so that we're not in a position where people could think we are biased. That was the problem with the involvement with the Trump campaign, is that everyone was like, how could you give so much help to one campaign and not the other? How does that work? Why do you do that? And Facebook told Congress that it offered identical support to both, but obviously the optics of that are untenable in this era where everyone is questioning biases of these platforms. Anton, how would you advise a political candidate today, in terms of how they should use technology? How should they exploit Facebook to the extent it can be exploited, and Google as well?
Listen, they're all great platforms to connect directly. The president said this many times, that he enjoys connecting directly to the people. I think when you're running for office or your political campaign, being able to take your message directly to the voters and your constituents is extremely important. I think the other thing around 2016 that sometimes gets lost in the conversation on the media side, on the using technology as a political football sometimes, is that the people that were involved on the 2016 side were really focused on advertising and sales. And like Sarah had mentioned, at the end of the day, they're trying to work with them as if they were a business to drive, people have quotas, they have revenue targets and these things. And so a lot of times in the conversations, you end up talking about algorithms or engineers, but in reality, the people that were most involved were really those ad sales teams.
Now, you're already seeing how the midterm campaigns are handling this, but how do you imagine 2020 is going to be different?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, so these platforms, let's take the Trump campaign, for example. Facebook and a lot of the other social platforms were great for direct response, right? You were building your lists, you were finding new donors, getting them to donate more money. If those platforms continue to be great direct response partners and platforms in order to convert people into being supporters, I think people will still continue to use it. What I'm hearing now from folks is, yes, there are more regulations, that it's tougher to become a political advertiser. There are a lot of rules that Facebook has put in place to help push back on any abuse from 2016. But all those things, I think, have turned out to be pretty positive for democracy and probably for Facebook as well.
All right, Republican digital strategist Anton Vulai. It's going to be an interesting couple of years. Bloomberg Tech, Sarah Fryer, as always. Thank you. Thanks. Well, another tech billionaire is born. Farfetch's founder talks luxury online retail after his company's stellar trading debut. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Ride-sharing giant Uber is in early talks to buy food delivery company Deliveroo, according to sources familiar with the matter. While the price Uber would pay is unknown, Deliveroo is valued at more than $2 billion. Sources say any offer from Uber would need to be significantly above that valuation. This, of course, the big food delivery startup out in Europe. Shares of online luxury clothing retailer Farfetch jumped as much as 46% on its trading debut in New York. CEO Joe Neves spoke to Bloomberg's Alex Barinka and explained how the company will use the funds to grow around the world.
There are two opportunities here, really. So one is the growth of online luxury, which is going to go to 25% in the next 7 years, according to Bain. This is a 100 billion incremental opportunity just in online luxury. But then, to your point, there's still 75% of transactions that are going to happen in store. And the big question is, how is technology going to help brands and retailers really improve the consumer experience in the physical store? And this is something that at Farfetch we're also very passionate about. We have started this with Chanel as an innovation partnership. So we're actually investing on both opportunities.
And Jose, when I think about where online luxury goods sales have really taken off, it's Asia. And you derive about a third of your sales, a third of your revenue is actually into customers in Asia. I'm curious, what's the success there? I know that there's a partnership with JD.com that Farfetch has. How have you been so successful selling into that promising market?
Absolutely. China is a very, very exciting opportunity. Chinese citizens are 1/3 of the luxury industry, whether they shop at home or when they're shopping abroad. Online penetration is very, very low in China. So this means that there is an incredible growth runway for Farfetch in the territory. That led to our partnership with JD.com. We have our own team. We have the Farfetch China app and website. We have local customer service, local payment systems, local marketing, local servers. So it's a truly localized experience. That is what's driving incredible growth to the Farfetch brand in that region.
And with the JD.com partnership, talk a little bit about how you're using WeChat. I know that you have stores, you help retailers get onto stores on WeChat. Have you learned anything from that endeavor that you could potentially bring to other markets? I know Instagram's pushing hard into selling more on their platform.
Yes, WeChat is an amazing app. It has over 900 million users. It is the Instagram plus WeChat plus PayPal plus etc. of China in one app. That is very, very powerful, very, very interesting. We now, with our acquisition of Curiosity China, we're powering the WeChat presence of 80 luxury brands. So we think that's really interesting and for the industry, and this is something that we will probably see in the Western world with Instagram or WhatsApp or other apps becoming more closely integrated with platforms like ours.
Farfetch CEO and founder Jose Neves speaking to Bloomberg's Alex Barinka. Coming up, Beth Comstock led GE through several transformations, and now she wants to help other companies do the same. She talks about being GE's first female vice chair and her new book next. Plus, Gap was the only retailer to make Bloomberg's first gender equality index. CEO Art Peck tells us exclusively why their mission is to do more than just sell clothes. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Beth Comstock helped navigate GE through many successful transformations, as well as some ups and some downs. As GE's first female vice chair, she pushed the company to adapt to tech trends. Her tenure saw the creation of GE and NBC's green initiatives like Eco Imagination, along with MSNBC, Hulu, NBC Digital. She also led GE to its new slogan, Imagination at Work. And now she wants to help others successfully navigate change as well. In her new book, Imagine It Forward, COMSTOCK shares her own transformation story as well as GE's to guide entrepreneurs and execs through creative risk-taking. She joins me here now in the studio. Great to have you on the show.
Emma. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So look, you worked at a big company for a long time. What do you really mean by Imagine It Forward?
Yeah, I mean, we need to think ahead. We need creative problem solvers. I mean, look at what's happening here in Silicon Valley. You could argue that maybe we need a few more people who can sort of think about the unintended consequences of some of our technology.
Within established organizations, it can be so hard to harness the power of change. You know, how can big companies as big as GE be nimble in this new age of technology?
Yeah, well, I found most big companies want to be nimble, but then taking the action to do it, it's another thing. I think you really do need to create almost two tracks in a company. You need your core established, kind of optimized today business, and you need the people who are creating the future. And they're different kinds of people with different measurements, different funding requirements, and it takes a longer amount of time.
So how do the people who are creating the future convince the people in the first track to do things differently?
Well, sometimes that's why you need separate tracks often, because they need to come together for certain key things clearly, and you need to set joint goals, align them around common metrics. But I think also you need these kind of rebel pirates, these people who come in, even in big companies, and kind of try to disrupt what's happening, and that is that creates a lot of tension in the early stages.
Now, look, it's not necessarily apples to apples, but do you think it's possible for the GEs of the world to compete with the Amazons and Apples and Facebooks and Googles today? Or is it too late?
Well, I think it's something we ought to think about. I think I look at a company like GE, where I worked for so long, a 125-year-old company. It doesn't get to be that old without knowing a thing or two about change. So I think there's a lot we can look at sustainability in these companies. But yeah, the stakes are always higher as you get new companies disrupting. But I wonder, as investors, as people who follow, we watch Amazon. They're getting bigger, more complex. The stakes are higher, the ability to take risks. So is maybe the question, can these guys continue to compete and be as fast and nimble as we've known them early?
So that is actually my exact next question. Now that Amazon and Apple and Facebook and Google, they are so big, it's hard to imagine them not being so dominant.
Yeah.
But do you see that in the future? Could they, fall from the throne, essentially?
I think you have to assume that is an eventuality. Hopefully they're thinking about it. Hopefully in Amazon today, in Netflix, pick your company, there are people sitting there going, are we still willing to take the same kind of risk? Can we? We're a public traded company. There are different expectations. I do think, especially founder-led companies, tend to get a bit more of an acceptance. But I also think you can, back to your other question, look at these traditional companies who've done reinvention. What big companies do well is culture. You look at some of the challenges. Take a Tesla just down the way. I mean, culture is a challenge, and I think these companies can learn a lot from some of the established companies that have had to figure out adaptation, get their culture to move. So I think that the scale-up companies, these newer tech companies, can learn a lot from some of the incumbents.
Do you think which of these new big tech companies do you think is the most disruptible?
Well, I'd say they're all disruptible. I think that the ones who sit and think we're not disruptible are the ones you'd start worrying about. They all have a head start, right? They all have been out there. I mean, I was in the digital media world when we saw Netflix just as a little tiny, whisper. We started at NBC. We was part of the team that helped seed Hulu. We knew that was coming. We didn't know how it was going to get there. Now you look at it 10, 12 years later. But the same forces that are going to happen to Netflix. So I really feel like everybody needs to keep imagining forward new scenarios and new alternatives.
Now, your book also gets very personal, and it's so rare to hear sort of personal lessons from somebody who's had the journey that you have. You were GE's first female vice chair. Why did you leave?
I left because there was a management change. John Flannery came in, Jeff Immelt left, John Flannery came in, new leader wants a new team. And I think that's what happens often. So it was a bit earlier than I expected to leave, but yeah, new team, new guy, new team.
What are the challenges we need to know more about in terms of getting more women into the top positions? Like where you were. I mean, there are so few people who make it to the level of Beth Comstock, though, so many who should and could.
Yeah, so many who should.
What don't they know?
Well, I think partly we just need to embrace more difference. We hire people like us. I mean, it's a human trait we have to overcome. I mean, you know it from the work you've done. People have all kinds of excuses why they don't want to hire people who are different. I think women, for a number of reasons, most companies have a good track record of hiring women at undergraduate level and then lose women as they progress in their career. So we need to address that issue. It's complex. We need to have programs that allow women different ways to come back in and out of the workforce. And those are happening, but it's too slow. But at the end of the day, we just need to make way for more women. We need to have a pipeline, and that takes time. You need to take your time out there finding the future women leaders of your company.
You have a killer line in my book where you challenge a male venture capitalist who had said, we're looking very hard for women, but we're not prepared to lower our standards. And you said, well, who created the standards? And you can't find any women who qualify? That's absurd.
Yeah.
What do you think what are some of the real reasons behind the scenes that more women aren't getting hired, that more minorities aren't getting hired? Because, you know, we're half the population.
Yeah. Well, people, one, they don't want to take a risk on something different. It's not proven. There's just this belief that if they haven't had the same path as us, gone to the same school, had the same kind of job, they can't clearly be as capable at this job. You document that well. I love the whole discussion of meritocracy and even the false promise of meritocracy. Who's setting the merits? And so I'd like to believe many people are well-meaning in that, but they aren't maybe thinking through enough and exposing themselves and challenging their thinking to say, is this really true? Am I doing enough to challenge that belief? And so I think we just let it pass. People are not taking enough risks to hire people who are different, disruptive, and potentially going to build a brighter new future. It's the risk, I think, at the end of the day.
We don't use the word visionary and genius to describe women, and yet we use that word to describe dozens and dozens and dozens of men. How fast do you see change happening? Though people always ask me, like, how optimistic are you? And I'm like, I couldn't be doing this if I wasn't optimistic. But you know, you've been there in the trenches, behind the scenes. How fast are we really going to see the numbers shift?
Well, I'm optimistic to feel there's a lot of energy. I think there are a lot of people saying we've got to make a change. We have to. I wish it were faster. And frankly, for having worked a whole career now, 25 plus years, I wish there would have been more change. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. I see it for my daughters, for young women coming up that, like, some of this should have changed by now. You mean the salary issues are still what they are? You mean you're still having to work, you know, much harder, prove things in a much harder way? How is that possible?
What's next for you?
I'm off doing my book tour, so that's a big thing, and I'm going to re-enter work in a very different way. Not sure. I'm excited to sort of get out and discover, and who knows? It's going to be a very different path for me.
Do you think GE can get back to greatness?
I think GE is great. I worked there for 25 plus years. It's a really great company that makes stuff the world needs. It's in a bad place with the stock market right now. It's got some complex issues that they have to work through. I think people underestimated the complexity of GE internally and externally, and it's not an easy fix.
All right, Beth Comstock, former GE Vice Chair, author of a new book, Imagine It Forward. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Emily. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot. It's busy on the book tour. All right, more deals news. Software maker Adobe has agreed to buy Marketo for $4.75 billion. The deal bolsters Adobe's marketing tools in a bid to compete against the likes of Salesforce and Oracle. It's expected to close in the fourth quarter of this year and would be Adobe's largest deal ever. Coming up, Gap wants to close the diversity gap. CEO Art Peck tells us how he believes he can do well by doing good. That is next. This is Bloomberg. The executive exodus at Tesla continues. Bloomberg has learned that the vice president of global supply management has resigned. Liam O'Connor is at least the fifth senior executive to leave Tesla within the span of a few weeks. That has coincided with a series of missteps by CEO Elon Musk. An Amazon online pharmacy could lead to the closing of almost 70,000 brick-and-mortar pharmacies in the United States. This, according to a note from Bernstein out today. Bernstein's Lance Wilkes says that small, independent pharmacies are likely to be hurt the most, and he estimates that by 2027, Amazon may have more than 12% market share in prescriptions. The company bought online pharmacy PECK over the summer. And there's new concern that a 2-year surge in demand for memory chips is fading. The largest maker of microprocessors, Micron, gave a revenue forecast that fell short of estimates. The company also said that its gross margins would suffer because of President Trump's latest round of tariffs on Chinese imports. Micron has an assembly plant in China. Well, Gap is the only retailer that made Bloomberg's Gender Equality Index this year. 69% of its store managers are women, 74% of global employees are women. And beyond gender, CEO Art Peck says the company wants to connect with everybody. Makes sense. And that the diversity of employees is a big part of that. I sat down with Peck to talk about his strategy to appeal to a wide base of consumers as the retailer works to make a comeback. Take a listen.
That's really the other side of these values, is that it's an important component of our employee value proposition. We are able to attract people here, especially here, the Bay Bridge in the background, sitting in ground zero of tech, and we have a huge tech business inside this company. We're able to attract people partly because of the values that we have as a company, and that diversity that we have inside this organization, it does manifest itself in showing up in front of our customers better. If you have a point of view, whether it's racial diversity, gender diversity, or whatever, I think that is exceedingly important in a product like ours where the products are inherently emotional.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of where you made a tweak, or where you had a shift on one side and you saw the shift on the other?
You know, part of it is, let's go back to Old Navy Plus, okay? This is a company that has not had a significant presence in the Plus product space. It's a missing opportunity for us. And, you know, we have a wide range of body types inside of this company. And some of the people that were most passionate about this are people who would literally, I would meet in the elevator and they'd say, I love this company and I love our brands, but I can't wear our products. And there was a lot of passion from people with more diverse body types in saying, let's open up the aperture of our products so that we can connect with more people out there. And fitting in Plus, I mean, fitting in any clothing is difficult, but there's an art and a science associated with it. And so having people in the building who wear the clothes every day is super important to getting it right.
Part of caring about diversity is being willing to do the hard work where it's not working and acknowledge the bright spots. You've got 69% of store managers are women, 74% of global employees are women. That's not the only measure of diversity.
Yep.
But where do you think you're doing well across the brands, and where do you want to do better?
So I think we're doing, from a gender standpoint, I think we're exceptional. And you noted that we have externally audited pay equality, which I'm really proud about. I've got 4 kids, 3 of them are girls, and to be able to lead an organization that has that, I think it's an excellent example, starting very personally for me. I think we still have work to do on racial diversity, just in terms of representation, not equality, but diversity. The fashion industry hasn't historically been a significantly racially diverse industry, and that's something that we're working on. And then I also look at my board, which sits on the top of the company, and I want to have more diversity on my board. And it's something that I'm very much connected with my chairman, our governance committee, and the whole board on continuing to add diversity to our board, both gender diversity and racial diversity. Diversity is also important when you think about advertising and how you are projecting the company. There was a scathing New York Times story about the COO of Uber, who was in charge of marketing, looking at an ad with a mixed-race couple and saying, well, how often do people really see mixed-race couples? And it struck some people in the room as tone-deaf. How does that strike you? Let me answer the question slightly differently. You know, I think that, if I look across our advertising, so when I was running Gap brand sitting in this building back in 2011 and 2012, we did an ad. We had a big T-shirt campaign in the summer, and we did an ad with 2 men inside the same T-shirt. And it was emotional, and it was fun, and we sweated a little bit. Were people going to react to that? We said, it's part of the world that we live in today, same-sex couples. We put it out there, and we got some criticism, but it was overwhelming support. And I think in our advertising and what we represent, in our casting, et cetera, we're trying to connect with everybody. That's one of the big virtues of our brands. It's one of the big values is democracy. And so there are plenty of mixed-race couples. There are same-sex couples. I mean, it's everything out there. It's the modern world that we live in. And I want the way that we present this company to the world to reflect the world that we live in. And do you see the diversity of your advertising impacting the diversity of your customers? 100%. 100%. I get... one of the things I love about being in this job is people write to me and people talk to me, and I'm sitting on a plane and somebody finds out what I do and they give me 2 hours of their sense, and part of that is when they see a diversity in body type, when they see diversity from a racial standpoint, it's always overwhelmingly favorable.
Our exclusive conversation with Gap CEO Art Peck. There was much more to it, which you can catch at Bloomberg.com. Coming up, the rise of the video gamer as an athlete, how esports competitors are getting their share of the limelight on traditional sporting networks next. And this weekend on Bloomberg Television, we bring you our best interviews from the week, including our exclusive chat with Visa CEO Al Kelly on how the 60-year-old company is taking on younger tech disruptors. Tune in this Saturday for the best of Bloomberg Tech. This is Bloomberg. As YouTubers like PewDiePie, iJustine, and Tyler Oakley became stars, the entertainment industry begrudgingly realized their value and started to embrace them. Now, we're seeing a similar trend in sports as the industry starts to recognize professional gamers as athletes, which for some is still hard to believe is a real thing. This week, ESPN announced it'll put a professional gamer on its magazine cover for the first time in its 20-year history. Joining us now from New York, Andrew Paradise, the CEO and founder of SKILLZ, a mobile esports company that runs more than 2 million competitions a day. So, Andrew, what do you think about putting a 27-year-old streamer on the cover of a magazine? Is this a good role model for kids?
Absolutely. I think esports is finally reaching the point where it's recognized worldwide, just like its offline equivalent sports. So as the name might imply, esports is just short for electronic sports. It's the digital equivalent or online activity that we've recognized for literally thousands of years offline with the sporting community.
So are gamers athletes?
Absolutely. In the same way that, that you would call any person who plays a offline game at its pinnacle of excellence or in competitive formats an athlete. Gamers are practicing and in front of audiences now that range in the millions. In fact, esports is more popular than many offline sports.
So here we have the streamer on the cover of one magazine, but when do you think, mainstream people will sort of understand or start to agree with you?
Well, there are a couple of different projections that speak to that. So this year, you're going to have about 200 million core enthusiasts watching esports worldwide. Core enthusiast is somebody who's watching an hour or more per day. And esports as a movement and thing will have about 2 billion people who are aware of esports by the early 2020s. So esports has been rising steadily over the last literally 20 years. We are right now just at the cusp of where you see a transition from competitive gaming to spectated audiences and recognition of esports, just like its offline equivalents.
Now, SKILLZ has more than 18 million players. You've awarded $300 million or so in prizes. Talk to us about what you actually do.
SKILLZ is an esports platform. What we do is we power game studios to deliver a competitive esports experience for millions of consumers. So at the front end of our software, consumers log into the SKILLZ network. They can then access and play in literally thousands of different video games where we power a competitive multiplayer environment. We then record and broadcast those tournaments. And so you can play in many different varieties of competitive formats using SKILLZ on thousands of games.
So are you thinking about things around tech addiction? You can't really play basketball, a physical basketball game for hours on end, but you can play a video game for hours on end. How do you think about, the potential downfalls of that?
Well, I think in many types of sports, there are governing rules and protections for the consumers or the players. If you think about the offline world, so I grew up playing soccer. Certainly, I would argue I played more than a few hours of soccer a day as a kid. In fact, many, many hours per day on the field or just practicing shooting. It's the same thing that you're seeing with video games. Now, admittedly, when you're doing something that's less physically strenuous, you're able to do it for longer periods of time. Having said that, I don't think anyone would say that someone who plays a lot of soccer is an addict. They'd refer to them as an enthusiast. And